Today we're going to be diving into my plan on organizing a 5-month deep dive with the Majestic Earth Tarot. This is a deck that I feel truly deserves a lot of time and space to connect with because of its very profound landscapes and the overall energy that it kind of exudes. So I've created a study plan to guide me through those 5 months, and I kind of wanted to share it all with you today. I guess as a disclaimer, I just wanted to state that I truly feel very lucky to have come across a copy of the Majestic Earth. I know it's very sought after and it can be quite pricey. Do not take that lightly, and that kind of is another reason why I'm leaning into doing a deep dive of this deck, because it deserves it, and I feel like I owe it to myself to really sink into the landscapes and the imagery of this deck. I have created a calendar, and I will link the PDF version of that calendar in the description just in case you want to reference it, see how visually I am setting up my study, and if it maybe will inspire you to set up your own organization and study with decks. But this is how I am organizing it. I think I'll pop some images up on the screen as I'm walking through my plans and how I'm setting it up. For visuals, I'm just going to take the deck out here. It does come with a little guidebook, and it has the title of the card, a little paragraph, some elemental stuff, and I'm not really sure what this keyword is. Okay, so it looks like it's tied to astrological things. I am not an expert on any of that stuff whatsoever, so it'll be interesting to kind of dive into that a little bit. And then it has some keywords here that are bolded, and then it tells you what the artwork is, because this is a deck that is curated from artwork that is in the, I guess, the database where once it reaches a certain age, you can kind of use the imagery without facing legal ramifications. But that's just how the guidebook is set up. A little bit of an intro, some guide to the court cards, reading tarot, the artworks. Yeah, so that's the little guidebook there. It has original artworks and all the people here. This copy that I have was from 2019, and then these are the extra cards here, which are elemental. So step one, or the first thing I really considered, was setting my intentions for this study and thinking about the ground rules to help guide myself. I find that in something like this where I'm doing a deep dive study, I really need to be very organized with it and very purposeful, because that will help me stick to the plan. So I asked myself questions like, what do I want to achieve with this study? What are my goals for it? How do I want to go about it? So for me personally, working with this deck is about understanding how it connects to natural elements, because this is very deeply rooted in the elements, the earth, the landscapes, as you can see. And how can that lens enhance my readings? How does it inspire reflection? And so I did a little bit of brainstorming and wrote down or jotted down my intentions. I thought this exercise also served as a great thing that I can revisit to help keep my focus very clear and meaningful, because this is going to be a slightly intensive study. So when I'm feeling unmotivated, or maybe I run behind, because that is a possibility, I have a goal and my intentions to refer back to help keep them at the forefront. And then after I kind of set aside or established my manifesto of the reason why I'm doing this study, I then broke it down into phases. And this is where it keeps everything very organized and trying to help it feel less overwhelming. I know that in sharing the document and the calendar setup for this study, it might look intimidating, but having it on paper helps my brain feel less overwhelmed because there's a structure in place. So the first thing that I wanted to do was to really flip through the deck in the first few days and kind of gather my first impressions and really write those down. And I've kind of thought about maybe perhaps getting a dedicated journal, or just setting aside some pages in a journal dedicated to where this will live. I haven't fully decided one way or the other with that just yet, but it will be housed somewhere. This is very important work, and I want to be able to go back and reflect on it or read my notes and thoughts and such. So I will be tracking all of this in a notebook of some sort. So I'll start by flipping through all the cards, getting my first impressions, soaking in their imagery. I have flipped through this deck. I have used it a couple times, but I haven't intentionally sat down for, I guess it would probably be like third or fourth impressions, but I really haven't jotted anything down in that way. I mean, there's so many cards in here, right? 78 cards, that I'm not going to remember each and every image that I've come across. There's a couple that this deck is really known for that I think, obviously I've seen, but just noting my first impressions of each card. And then I wanted to move on to spending some time reading through the guidebook and reading through the creator's perspective. So that all those intro pieces, all of the additions here, like the intro and elemental cards, this portion right here, really taking time to read through it. And then maybe reading through, pulling a couple of cards and reading maybe a few from each suit and the major arcana, just to get an overall feel for the guidebook. And so I'm going to be jotting all of that down. I'm going to take time after I've done those 2 tasks in the first week to reflect and journal on those things. And then we're going to move on to spending about a week with the majors, and I'm putting them into groups of 7 and splitting 7 over a couple of days, just so I really have time to sit with each card. The hardest part of organizing this was splitting 5 months down and making sure it didn't feel overly intensive, that I was still able to take my time, but wanting to fit in all of the pieces that I wanted to. I'm going to be focusing on the majors for about a week, and I'm going to be writing down the imagery, the symbolism, cross-referencing it with the guidebook and even the traditional RWS interpretations, looking up, taking time, making sure I'm looking up a little bit about the artist and that time period. Just having a couple of bullet points on those I think is really important, because they were chosen for a reason. These are pieces of art, and maybe learning a little bit about each one in the historical context will bring forward more information or shed some light in the tarot meanings as well. It might help create some depth in that way. So this process here is not just about learning the deck, right? Learning about each of the cards, but really bonding with the deck. And part of bonding with this deck, I felt, was looking up those artists and that time period and things like that. And then I'm going to take some time to journal and reflect again. I've built in a lot of time here. So the yellow that you'll see in the calendar, it is about reflection and journaling. And some days I might have a lot to say, other days I may not, but just having the opportunity to then reflect on what I was just focused on. And I tried to interject those reflection and journaling days between finishing a lesson, I guess, and starting another part of my deep dive study. And once I've spent some time with the individual cards, I'm going to be studying the deck by its suits and elements. So for the Majestic Earth Tarot here, the suits have a very unique connection to the natural world. So this phase is all about seeing the bigger picture and how the cards within each suit relate to one another and what they are teaching about their particular element. And then after being a little more familiar with the suits and how they fit with RWS and kind of that portion of the study, I'm going to begin a daily draw practice that will carry throughout the rest of the months of study. So visually on the calendar, I didn't put purple in for every day, but it's just something that I am going to be doing that is kind of unspoken in there for the remainder of the months. So I will be starting a daily draw practice just to get into the habit of using the deck. I think it's important. I don't just bring decks into my collection that are pretty and wonderful and great to look at, but I also really want to respect each and every one by using it. And that's an important part of my practice and my goals here. Then we are going to move on to the next phase, which is doing a very deep dive of the major arcana. Again, I kind of did that a little bit in the first month, but setting aside more time, going through them in, I don't know what it's called, but there's like the beginning of the majors. You're starting off on the Fool's Journey, so there's the beginning portion of the cards. Then you move on to like cards 7 through 12, kind of grouping them in that way. And then cards 13 through 15. So many of these are like sequential in nature. I mean, obviously the Fool's Journey is sequential, but laying them out and looking at them in the perspective of a sequential little scene, right, I think is really going to add a layer to my understanding. And seeing the images side by side of the majors and how they might relate to one another or not. I think that's also important to note, that how are they dissimilar as much as how are they similar. So taking some time carving out basically the whole of March and going really intensely in on the major arcana, but in a little bit of the Fool's Journey sequential way. And as you can see from the image that I'll have up, I did work in some reflection and journaling time, which is indicated in yellow, to help break up a little bit that intensiveness, right? Give myself a little bit of a break. So I might not need 2 days to reflect and journal. I might just spend 1 day on that, but then I'll have kind of like a rest day, if you will. Moving on to April, which is the 3rd month of the study, I'm going to be breaking it down wands and cups. And the reason that I chose that is because April is my birth month. And I think I've mentioned before how I felt very much like I have that fire, but I'm very watery at the same time. So that's of great interest to me personally. So I wanted to combine Wands and Cups, spend the first week and a half, I guess, with the Wands, and specifically Ace through 5, and then 6 through 10, breaking that up. So April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, I'll do a deeper dive of Ace through 5, and then have a reflection and journaling day. And then April 5th through 7th, I'm going to be doing cards 6 through 10. Then I'll have another reflection and journaling day, and then I'm going to start the cups portion. So again, Ace through 5 on the first 3 days, a reflection and journaling day, and then 3 days to finish out 6 through 10. And then I'll be moving on to the court studies for those suits, following suit and doing the Wands first and then the Cups, and really spending some time with the court cards because they're an important aspect, and I think one that sometimes people really struggle with. And because these are all landscapes, I really wanted to take note sequentially, page through king. How is it looking visually? Some of these landscapes, for example, in this card, there are some people featured here and there. Most of them are on a smaller scale. They're kind of in the background. They're not really the focal point. Usually the focal point is the landscape, but then there are a couple of cards here that are more zoomed in on a figure with them looking out into a landscape. I think there's another card like that. It's this one that's on the box. I think this is the Hermit. So I don't know if that's just for the majors, but we'll find out as we go through the study. So that kind of concludes April. I did start building in specific rest days, which I've indicated in white. I think it's important to give yourself some time to digest, especially me. That's really how I work. I take time to process things. So having some space where I'm not intensively looking at this deck, I think would be really helpful. For May, we're doing the same thing that we did with the Wands and the Cups, but we're doing it with Swords and Pentacles, looking through Ace through 5, 6 through 10 with the Swords, and then Ace through 5, 6 through 10 with the Pentacles, and then spending some time with the court in each of those suits. And then I think almost just as important as the first month, where we're really setting up and doing our first impressions, getting a feel for the deck, the last month, June, I think very important. I think it's probably the part of the intensive study that I'm looking forward to the most, because it's about integration and practice and playing with spreads, either suggested through the guidebook or making of my own, playing with some pairs, bringing in other oracle decks and other tarot decks and seeing how they work with one another, how they vibe off one another. Then maybe incorporating some daily draw practice that I'm going to still be doing, like I said, throughout all of these months, but maybe have a specific intention each day of the week and seeing how it fits in with a specific intention versus just willy-nilly just picking one and kind of going with it. Just being a little bit more intentional with the daily draw practice. And then I think I wanted to set some time to use the deck to read for others, because I mostly read for myself, but my partner here and I have some other friends and family that I think would be really open to some readings, and just seeing how it connects with other people and how they interact with them. I think having that perspective will really also help my personal bond and practice with this deck. And then having a period of final reflection, and I don't have them just yet. I'm trying to be as organized as possible, but I think there's something to working on the fly a little bit. But as I get closer to June and the final reflection, the 2 days that I have set aside for that, I'm going to be thinking about more specific journaling prompts and questions and laying out everything, all of my research that I have, all of my notes, taking stock of everything as a whole, and kind of just concluding how I thought that this went. I think I've just thrown a lot at you. It is very in-depth. I tried to be as planned out as I could be because I want to take this seriously, and I've put in so much upfront work that I want to honor the planning Hannah and really have a go at studying this deck. And if I find that this kind of format works for me, I'm going to be replicating it in the next 5-month study, which will be with Taroki by Mr. Freiburg. That will be my second deep dive of the year. So not only reflecting on, the last portion where I'm reflecting on the cards, but how well did this format work for me? Can I replicate it? What would I change? What would I keep the same? Because this deck, when I get into the study of this, I'm taking a month off of July, but kind of like not really, before I start my 5 months with this, because it is more Marseille style, and I have not really used Marseille a whole lot. I have this deck. I have some decks that are a little bit more pippish in nature, but I haven't really put a focus on Marseille specifically. So before I dive into my deep dive of this deck, I wanted to kind of take a month off and do a very preliminary high level overview of Marseille and getting some foundational stuff under my belt, or in my tool belt, whichever that phrase is. So I have something to go into the study with. I think there are definitely going to be things that I take from this study into the next study with that deck, but because it's also Marseille focused, it might look a little different, at least how I am breaking up each month and what I will be looking to focus on in those weeks. So anyway, that's my plan for the next 5 months starting in February. My deep dive with the Majestic Earth Tarot. If this resonates with you, if I've confused you, if things have made sense, if you have any suggestions, by the way, as well, let me know in the comments below. I will be providing updates probably in my monthly wrap-up / the next month intentions, so be on the lookout in those videos if you're wanting an update on how my deep dive study is going, or if you would prefer maybe a couple of dedicated update videos along the way, or maybe just a wrap-up video just dedicated to this study towards the end. Let me know. I welcome all suggestions, and of course I want to take into consideration what you guys want to see. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're doing well, and until next time, see you around.